So I want to tell my listeners that I was married for 7 years and then got divorced. So with the divorce and everything, I was married technically for 8 years. Now, the reason I'm saying that is today we're going to talk about being divorced after a really long-term marriage, say 30 years or more. It was hard for me to get divorced as it is for everybody, but I can't even imagine the complexity and how much harder it would be, I think, if you were married for that long, in some respects. I'm not saying like, "Oh, your marriage was only 5 years, so it's not that hard." I get it. But the reason I wanna talk about this is because there are a lot of things to consider if you're getting divorced after a really long-term marriage. And my guest to talk about this wrote an article for Divorce Girl Smiling called Divorce After 30 Years of Marriage. And her name is Catherine Miller. And Catherine's a divorce attorney, a certified mediator, a collaborative divorce professional, the founder of her practice, Miller Law Group, based in New York and Connecticut. And she's a divorced girl smiling, trusted professional. Hi, Catherine.
Jackie, it's so much fun to be here again.
I know we were just saying before this podcast, I want to tell my listeners that we haven't talked in a little while and I miss you. It's great to see you.
It's great to see you too.
Okay, so Catherine, I want to tell my listeners, has gone through a divorce, but your divorce was not a super long time either, right?
No, I was married 10 years from the beginning to the very end, and we spent a couple of years in the process of getting divorced. So, yeah.
But you have lots of clients who are getting divorced after 30 plus years. Tell me, do I have a valid point in saying that this is really complex? I mean, there are many factors to consider if it's been 3 or more decades.
Yeah, I mean, I'm remarried and I'm approaching my 25th anniversary. And I think, well, if I were to get divorced now, which I'm not planning to do, but would that be different? And I think the answer is really yes. And yesterday I was talking to a guy and we were doing a little role playing about talking about what you do. And he's just like, well, hopefully I'm not going to be talking to you because I've been married for 35 years. And I'm like, well, I talked to plenty of people who've been married for 35 years. And I think it really is different. It's different emotionally and it's different like in your physical place in the world. And the external and internal concerns are not completely different, but there's a shift there and some of them are really deeper.
And there's a lot of things to think about with aging, retirement, finances, healthcare, dating after all of those years. And that's what I want to touch on today. So I'm going to just start because there's so many different topics and so many questions I have. But tell me first about the emotional aspect. What are the people who come to see you and say, I've been married for 30, 35 years? What are they saying when they walk into your office?
Well, I think they fall into a couple of different categories, a few different categories. Some people are really not expecting it. It's their spouse who's decided to do it. And it's so disorienting, I think, emotionally when someone else decides to end the marriage because the question of who am I in the world, right? Who am I close to? Who do I relate to? Whose family? Who do I live with? Who do I not live with? How am I going to go on vacation? Or how am I going to do this thing or that thing? And just trying to think about what life is like. We're coming into the holiday season as we're having this conversation. What about Thanksgiving? What if we went to my soon to be ex's family for Thanksgiving every year, or we hosted them? Like that, just that disorientation about who you are in the world is really, really hard for some people. Other people are like, have been waiting for the last 10 years before they felt like the time was right that they could make this decision, take this action and leave. And for those people, I think it's easier emotionally speaking. I mean, a lot of the external concerns are still the same, but the emotional decision of like, I want to. form a new identity. I want to form a new place in the world that is not uh, colored by this relationship, and whether or not that's because you want to form a new partnership because you yearn for a more intimate or satisfying emotional connection or physical connection, or you want to live just in a completely different place or in a different way than the way that you feel maybe burdened by the marriage. And so I think, but even so, it's it's a really big shift, and you're in a kind of in between place, right? In between what was and what will be, and forming that place, and the emotions of just catching up for someone who is not making that decision are different from someone who's thinking, this is my next great adventure.
But the person who's thinking this is my next greatest adventure and is so happy to finally be here, they can actually start the process. The husband moves out and now they're thinking, "Oh my gosh, wow, this is a lot scarier than I thought." Because in both cases, whether you were the one who wanted the divorce or you were the one who was left, some of these people have never lived in a home by themselves. Like you said, they've never taken a vacation by themselves. They've spent the holidays the same way every year. They have never maybe gone on a girls' trip or had a girls' night out. And so it can be traumatic to either case. And, with me, I was married for 7 years. I kinda in that respect, I was like, "Fine, I've lived alone." I lived alone till I was 35. Okay, big deal. Now I'm 41. I've lived with someone for 6.5 years. It wasn't that big a deal to me.
Right.
But, I know people who are almost like you said, in a daze, like they just kind of can't believe and they don't know how to adapt to all this massive change that is about to happen after that long of a period of time.
Yeah, and it can be very lonely, right? Or you think, all right, like my whole friend circle is couples. They're not going to want to see me. That's not true, by the way. I think that's in the head of the person who's getting divorced, fearing, but they definitely don't want to hear about how miserable you are all the time. They'll hear about that a little, and you can get some support there, but they're not going to want to hear about that all the time. Or you think, how can I go out to dinner by myself? I want to go out to dinner, but oh, that's so awkward. What will people think? Or want to go on vacation, or just anything can just feel like, I remember when I moved out of New York City and something went wrong in my house. I'm like, wait, I can't just call the super. It's kind of like that. Like I hadn't even thought of that. There wasn't going to be a super. And so it's kind of, I mean, it's not the same, but it is kind of the same. And that like there's so much that you hadn't thought of until you're actually living it.
You're listening to the Divorced Girl Smiling podcast. My name is Jackie Pilosoff, and I'm your host. And today I'm here with divorce attorney Catherine Miller, founder of the Miller Law Group. And Catherine and I are talking about getting divorced after a very long term marriage, 30 years or more. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about healthcare, aging, illness, dating, work, retirement, and maybe some more if we have time for all that. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Divorce Girl Smiling podcast. My name is Jackie Pilosoff, and I'm your host. Are you getting divorced after a long-term marriage? We're talking 30 years, 25 years, 35 or more years. If so, this is a great episode for you. My guest is Catherine Miller, divorce attorney, certified mediator, collaborative divorce professional, founder of the Miller Law Group in New York and Connecticut. And Catherine, tell me about, you just touched on loneliness. So, a lot of these people have never lived in a home alone. And do you find that these long-term marriages, the person, like, I guess maybe I should say the wife usually keeps the home? Is it different in every case? Are they afraid of being a homeowner by themselves? Tell me how they're feeling about that.
Well, I think the home is a major issue in almost every divorce. Now, maybe you live in a rental, you've lived there for a couple of years, it's not a big deal. But generally, in a long term marriage, if you're still living in the home that you lived in during the marriage, raised your children in, that can be an emotional touch point. And so a lot of times people who are staying in the marriage, whose decision it wasn't, decide that they want to keep the home, like hold on to that stability that is like the same rooms, the same furniture, the same way it feels. And sometimes, Jackie, that's a mistake, because for one thing, it's big and it can seem really empty. And if your children after 30, 35 years of marriage have left and they're not coming back, right? you
Mhm.
know they it can be a good idea to hold on to it for a while, but for the long term, there's a lot of care that might go into it. It may be too big for one person. It can be like, where did I leave my keys? Oh, that's a lot of vacuuming. There's different bathrooms where things can leak or whatever, but it also has ghosts
Yeah.
of the prior life, and that can just feel really, really sad, and it's expensive.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. The other part of that is, do you want to pay a mortgage that you could have that money to take trips and live your life and enjoy your life and not have to worry so much about money? So, you might have a huge house and your mortgage is 4 or $5,000 and you could get an apartment for 3,000, still a nice place. I would never tell anybody to live anywhere where they don't love it and feel safe, but you would have an extra 2,000 a month to, have to enjoy your life and have a better quality of life. So, who should somebody talk to if they're in this dilemma about the house and they don't wanna let it go?
I think it's a really good idea to talk to a financial planner, and particularly a certified divorce financial analyst. You don't want that person without the financial planning. These are two different people. You want a financial planner who has experience with working with divorced and divorcing people, partly because they understand the unique tax pieces that go into that. They understand the psychology of it, like what might be useful, what might not be useful, because you shouldn't do something for money alone, right? If you can, you should do something because you want to do it, just as you just said, Jackie, right? But then once you understand if it's between this and that, well, let's understand the financial implications and the other implications that are going to have ramifications on the rest of your life, so that if you're staying in the house but it's taking every extra penny to do it, then you can't go on vacation, you can't go out to dinner, you can't buy stuff for your kids when you want to. You're worried about money all the time just to stay in a big place. Maybe you want to live in something that is less expensive, still lovely, perfect for you, design it exactly how you want to do it, and be able to do those other things. Or maybe you don't want to, which is fine, but at least you go to talk to someone who can talk through what all of the options are, pros and cons, and help you make a decision that really feels right for you.
Well, I'm really glad that your answer to that question was, oh, you should go to therapy. And let me explain. I do believe in therapy, and therapists are very, very valuable. But when we're talking about divorce or something like this, when you said talk to a financial advisor who has experience with divorce, that could be your person that you could talk to about these emotional issues. Or maybe that person is really good with the money aspect, but they're like a married guy and they might not get you. That's why it's important to have a divorce team. And when I say that, I mean, another person who can help you with this home issue of your emotional issues is a certified divorce real estate expert, a real estate agent who has this certification, who has a passion of helping people divorce. Because believe me, they're probably divorced if they have that certification. So they'll understand you. A mortgage lender who's a CDLP, certified divorce lending professional. Most of those people are divorced too. They understand. So, one of these or more are going to be the people who are going to help you through the emotional part and help you make the decision of what's better. Oh, and I forgot to mention divorce coach, which is huge. And before we started this podcast, Catherine and I were saying how valuable these divorce coaches really can be. So, I would highly recommend talking to all of these wonderful professionals. And hey, I gotta give a shout out, Catherine. You're a divorce attorney. Now, I'm not saying that if you're Catherine's client, you should call her and talk about your emotional life and how you're feeling emotionally, because that's not what Catherine is trying to do for you. But you are one of those people who somebody could talk to about it for a few minutes and probably feel a lot better because you've been divorced and you're just a very you understand all of this stuff. So,
Well, Jackie, I would hope that anyone who's getting divorced can talk to their attorney about their feelings some, right? We make decisions in the emotional part of our brain. And if it's sounding too rational, it's probably not really thought through or felt through, right? In terms of the decisions. And so you should be able to talk to you and you should feel comfortable talking to your attorney about your feelings. There comes a point when you're just processing your feelings with your attorney that you get to a place where it's not as efficient as it could be. And efficient, it's expensive, and that person, like myself, might have a lot of experience talking to people about their feelings around divorce, but not a lot of training. And so it could be really better to work with someone to sort of help you focus those feelings and kind of figure out what they're telling you and what's important to you about that.
and I think you have a great point that you said there's a point it becomes inefficient. And when that point comes, your attorney can then say, "Hey, I would recommend this person for you." She
100%.
or he might, "Why don't you call that person, have a consult, and delve more into this when you're not paying the hourly fee and they're better trained than me at this kind of stuff." So I love it. I just love it. Okay. Let's move on to, oh, I know what I was going to say. You can also look in the Divorced Girl Smiling Trusted Professionals section, and you're going to find all of these people: CDFAs, financial advisors, divorce coaches, CDREs, mortgage lenders. Okay, let's move on to aging. So, if somebody has been divorced for 30 years, let's say they're in their 50s, 60s, or 70s. So, I always tell people you can reinvent yourself at any age. Do you agree?
Yeah. It just it's could be more work at sometimes than others. But getting divorced is a great time to reinvent yourself. So
And also, do you ever hear from clients like, I don't, what am I supposed to do now? Well, of
yeah,
course, that's a very normal question. You are not alone if you're like, yes, yes, that's exactly how I feel. And you're listening to this. Believe me, everybody has been at that point in their life at some point. What the heck am I supposed to do now? And how would you answer that?
figure it out. You're
That's
supposed to
the
figure
divorce attorney in her. Now, I would say
it out.
try a bunch of things and
Yeah,
see what you like.
it's the same thing. You're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Find that, there is no supposed to,
Hmm.
right? There is no script for this. There is no playbook for this. So first you need to figure out how you're going to live your what you're how you're going to spend your days, right? Just getting through paying the bills, eating your meals, all going to work if you work outside of the home, those kinds of things are all right. I just figured out a routine. And you also, this is a huge opportunity to figure out what really matters to you. And so you could take this opportunity to really think through at this point in your life where you are, what what matters, what's the most important thing or the most important things, and that how do you want to spend your time. And then I think that most successful post-divorce people get clear about that, spend some time thinking about that and meditating on it and trying some different things and then going in the direction that their heart leads them to go, right? And
Right.
not trying to rebuild the life they had if that's not what makes them happy anymore. If
Hmm.
they have, and usually I think people are ready to make a change even if they didn't necessarily want it, and ready to rethink those things that are most important and go get those things.
Well, first of all, great points, but I want to tell my listeners this doesn't happen overnight. You are
No.
allowed to take time and say, I'm so pissed that this happened to me. I'm angry. I'm hurt. I'm upset. I don't want this. I get it. If you were the person who was left. And
Totally.
you don't have to figure out what you want to do right now or even in the next few months. Take time to grieve and just do things on the short term that you like. If you enjoy reading, read books. If you enjoy taking walks, take walks. Baby steps. And then think to yourself, what did I used to be good at? What do I like to do? What makes me happy? Is that a volunteer position? Is that changing jobs? Is that starting in a new job, reinventing myself, but starting at the bottom? That's okay too. I mean, I want to tell my listeners when I got back into journalism and I had a pretty good career writing articles for the Chicago Tribune, who ultimately gave me my own column. It was like my dream came true. I didn't start off and say, hey, I want a column in the Tribune. I started off there standing on a street corner every week asking people what they were, the question of the week. And it paid $50 a week. And I had to go ask people a question that they gave me, write down the answer, take their picture, and send it into the Tribune. And I was like, well, this is kind of like a job for like a high school or college kid. It seems very internshipy to me. But it led me to my own column eventually. So, like Catherine said, like just go in for a taste of what you like, and it will happen if the passion is there and if you work hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
And
let's move
but it doesn't
on.
even have to be a work thing. It could be, listen, I've always wanted to learn ballroom dancing. There are classes you can go to, even as a single person. Well, they'll pair you up with other people in the room. Or I've always wanted to paint, or I've always wanted to get a dog or a cat, but my spouse could, there are so many other things that could bring so much richness to your life that doesn't require, a new career.
One of my friends got divorced. Her husband left her after like 25 years of marriage. She was devastated. I've never seen anyone who was that distraught, really. And she said, "You know what I wanna do? I wanna hold little babies." And she started volunteering at a hospital, and she wasn't able to do that for, like, a few months. She had to start somewhere else, and then when they trusted her enough, they gave her the babies, and she was thrilled. It's real.
Exactly. That's exactly what I mean. It doesn't
Mhm,
have to be a sea change, but
mhm.
just something that you've always wanted to do that's still there.
Right. All right. I want to touch on aging and illness. So, a lot of people will say to me if they're older getting divorced, who's going to take care of me? Now I'm old. Who's going to want me? And all the guys that I meet, all they want is to find a woman to take care of them when they're aging or they're ill. What do you think about that?
Yeah. That's such a big question, Jackie. And I think it goes to the expectations of men and women in our society and our culture, and the expectations that men and women have about who's going to take care of me, because you probably don't speak to a lot of women who say that.
Right.
And I know a lot of women who get divorced later in life, or whose husbands die, who don't want to repartner because they don't want to do that.
Right. And
Right.
and you also have to think about it. Like I know this woman who was dating this guy and she was going to marry him and he had no money and no insurance and he was like close to 70. And I said to the woman like, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but ask yourself what's going to happen. Do you want to put this man on your insurance? And are you willing to take care of him if tomorrow he falls and breaks his hip or something happens? Is that what you want? Because you have to think ahead. It's really important. You can have a really happy relationship with somebody and you don't have to live with them. And
Or
then you're not really liable. The other thing I was going to say is that I got a long-term care insurance policy when I was 50. I think I was like 52. And the reason I got it is because I was working in the senior care industry and I saw all these people that couldn't afford the care. So I'm a great catch for someone. And I tell my now spouse, like, I'm such a good catch because if anything happens to me, I have a long-term care insurance policy which pays for care if I get dementia, God forbid, that pays for that. So if you're listening to this, I have a recommendation. Joanne Littman is a financial advisor. She's a divorce girl smiling, trusted professional. Talk to her about long term care insurance. Then you never have to worry. And also, if you're dating and you're in a relationship and that comes up, now you know what it is. And now you probably would feel a lot better. So, I guess the whole point of this is if you're getting divorced and you're older, try to set yourself up that you can take care of yourself, set money aside or get a policy, and also think about it if you're dating somebody older who like doesn't have money or doesn't have insurance. It's really something to think about for in a practical sense.
That's very good advice.
Okay, I want to end this on a positive note, so let's just end with dating. So, do these women who, and maybe men who come to you get divorced, do you ever hear from them and they like fell madly in love again?
Often, here's what happens, Jackie. I say to them, so if you get married again, please call me and let's talk about a prenup. And they're like, oh no, I'm not even going to date again, Catherine. And I'm like, okay, so just when that you do decide you're going to date and you want to get married again, call me. I'm like, I'm not going to charge you for that consultation. Okay. We're just going to talk about it because I want you to call. And then inevitably, a couple of years later, they're like, Catherine, when last time we talked, I was sure I was never going to date again, but dot 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 they have, and they've fallen back in love. So I think that dating though is really daunting when you've been out of the, let's put it this way, market for a few decades. One, because hey, listen, going out on dates is scary when you haven't been doing it, and the idea of having sex with somebody else is terrifying. But and like there's this thing called online dating. What the heck is that? How does that work? And so it can feel like, oh, I'm gonna look. Well, maybe I'll put a profile up, but I'm not gonna put a lot of effort into it, until you kind of warm up. But you know what? There are people who can help with that. There are a lot of coaches, and I've interviewed a bunch of them on my podcast, Divorce Dialogues, who help with online dating and help you tell you what to say on the date, who are like coaches for dating. And I think that's a really good idea. When you're ready to put your toe in the water, get some help. You don't have to do this by yourself.
Alyssa Deneen, Style My Profile
Absolutely.
NYC, stylemyprofilenyc.com. Great dating coach, spent 7 years on dating apps before meeting the love of her life. Great person, will help you with your profile picture, coach you, help you with swiping and all that. Okay, so I love that we ended this on a positive note because I know there are people listening thinking, oh, things seem hopeless. And maybe, Catherine, you and I are helping people not feel hopeless because you have a great life ahead of you. I don't care if you're getting divorced at 50, 60, or 70. You have a great life ahead of you, and it's all what you decide to put into it. I know you're feeling sorry for yourself. That's okay. I know you're angry, resentful, scared. Or you might be one of those people Catherine was talking about who are like, this is the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm so glad I'm finally doing this. In any case, we want to wish you all the best and we believe in you and know that you can have a happy life ahead. So, with that said, Catherine, any last words?
I just want to endorse what you said, that this might not be what you planned, but there is a silver lining here. You just have to find it, and you have to find how this can serve you. One, a lot of times my clients will say to me, but Catherine, what do I do with the anger? And that is something that you are going to have to deal with. If you're feeling really angry, do get the help with a divorce coach or a therapist to work that through, because if you don't, it's not that it's okay, right? I'm not saying that it's okay. Whatever happened, it doesn't have to be okay. But dealing with the anger and finding something positive to do with it is really crucial to that happily ever after.
Great, great way to end things. Great advice. Catherine, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's always fun.
And if you like what you heard and you want to have a consult with Catherine, you can find her at miller-law.com. You can also find her in the trusted professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling at divorcedgirlsmiling.com. And you can also find on Divorced Girl Smiling other trusted vetted professionals. You can go there to listen to more podcasts, read articles, sign up for my free consult, or find out more about my new book, Who Let the Dogs Out? An empowering, funny, and inspiring guide to dating after divorce. So, thank you so much for listening, everybody, and we'll talk to you real soon.